Hey everybody, wherever you may be, welcome to episode 109 of Overdose and Chill today. It is my great honor and privilege to introduce Vincent, who is our digital marketing director for APAC, sits in Melbourne. Say hello, Vincent.
Hey everyone, great to be here.
So you got both sides of the Tasman today. I'm in Auckland. I'm Sam, Chief Marketing Officer at Overdose. As I say, it's great to be here. We're going to chat you through some of our insights that we've collated as we're kind of rapidly nearing peak season, as we call it, where things get a bit hectic in our world. Lots of sale activity goes on, and there's a lot of buzz, a lot of moving parts for brands, and we just want to share some insights and kind of help and navigate this time of year for our brands and for anyone out there that's listening in that is interested in some of the stuff that's going on. So what we've got for you today is a bit of a collection of insights. I've themed around a few talking points, I think, that are relevant or most relevant to this year. 2022 it will be very different to 2021. We know that. So we'll talk a bit about what those differences are, what we're seeing in the market with consumer behaviors, what we're seeing in the market with platforms and pricing and technologies and all that fun stuff that we live and breathe every day. But the point here is that we're kind of hopefully arming everyone listening in with a lot of insights and a lot of kind of useful tips and tricks for getting through this peak season, which is going to be, as I say, an interesting one for everybody. I want to kick off by we're in October now, and you'll see some charts shortly that suggest that a lot of people have already started their Christmas shopping. I, for one, have definitely not started my Christmas shopping. I'll be in the minority this year of doing it last minute. Vinny, have you? Can I ask if you've begun your Christmas shopping this year already? Are you onto it?
No, I'm honestly pretty horrendous with my Christmas shopping. I think I'm always very head down, working, getting everything sorted, and then I stop and realize that I've left it to the last minute and trying to scramble things around. So I'm definitely don't align to a lot of the insights that we're presenting here personally, but I think there's a lot of people out there that absolutely, I definitely know people who are already looking around, making their lists, checking it twice, and doing all of those types of things. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to kind of entertain both scenarios, people who do go early, and then people who do go last minute, and how to capture a bit of both of the spectrum.
100%. That's what we like to hear. Everyone at Overdose is knuckling down, getting our campaigns and activities sorted out, and we're not worrying about Christmas shopping because we put our customers first. Awesome. So let's kick it off. I wanted to kind of open things up with a bit of a broad statement, just sort of summarizing where we are or what we're going to see this year. And we'll dig into some of these themes over the course of the next sort of hour or so. To read it out, the peak season this year is definitely going to start earlier than ever. We've touched on that already in our conversation. Advertising is getting more expensive every year. You probably heard this from multiple places recently. The costs of advertising are increasing. But layering on top of that, customers are going to be much more savvy and careful with their dollars this year. We're all very aware of the cost of living crisis that's going on. Crisis is a strong word, but lots of definite pressures on incomes, inflation, interest rates, etc. So it's all kind of all of these things add up to a kind of a unique peak season, I think, for most brands. So the purpose of this presentation is to talk through some of those themes, some of those insights, give you a bit of a picture of what's going on and what we mean by these things, but more importantly, talk about kind of how we can prepare amongst all the stuff that's going on. So we'll jump into it. The four themes that we're going to work through today kind of break down what we see as the key messages as far as we're concerned for brands that are out there advertising and trying to make a successful peak season. The first one being start now. We'll dive into that shortly, meaning if you haven't already started your planning and preparation for peak season, we need to get cracking because there's a lot to do, and the earlier you start, the more successful it will be. The second one is staying fluid. So again, back to the fact that we're not altogether sure, what the peak season is going to look like, how much money people will be spending, how much they'll be going in store versus online. The advertising platforms, what the pricing is going to look like on those platforms year on year. So there's a point here that we'll talk to, which is about just having a level of fluidity and agility when it comes to being able to, adapt as the peak season goes through and making sure we're capturing, the most of the opportunity as we work through the time period. The third point we'll cover off is making retention a focus. So this is something we are passionate about, certainly at Overdose, in terms of making sure you are doing more than you were last year in terms of capturing your first party data from customers, making sure you're really honing in on those customers and driving repeat purchases and retention. That applies not just for peak season, obviously, but it sets you in good stead for the future and kind of coming into next year. So we'll talk a bit about that. And then the final point here is talking about some barriers that are sort of out there at the moment with consumers in terms of, what would be stopping them from buying online at this stage? What are they kind of feeling are the major barriers to purchasing online? We'll talk through a few of those things and some actions around kind of how we can potentially mitigate those barriers. So that's setting the scene. We'll jump into it. Start now. As I mentioned in the intro, we are seeing year on year that customers are through in market, doing their research, looking for bargains, looking for sale events earlier than they ever were. So if you look at the chart here, we're looking at search volumes related to sales over the course of the full year. This is based on last year's data. We'd expect this trend to become even earlier this year in terms of where the search volumes start to pick up for sales. But based on last year, people were already starting to search, around about August, which is already 2 months ago. So definitely a lot more kind of early activity when it comes to people out there looking around, looking for bargains. Vinny, I'm sure you're kind of seeing this already with clients who are trying to capture as much demand as possible kind of before we get to true peak season. You might have some examples of clients who are kind of out there or at least kind of working earlier than they were in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely different categories we're seeing. We are seeing the rise start to happen. We're starting to see that winter slum end, and people are out there navigating, looking, searching for things, and we're definitely seeing some throughout the year. Sessions have been really high this year. Conversion rates probably are lagging a little bit in certain circumstances, and that can be due to that getting on the shopping list, people doing their research, and then having plans in place to effectively try and get a good deal once sales do start to appear as well. There are a lot more people who are more savvy this year as well. More people are aware of what the last couple of years of end of year trading looks like from the consumer perspective. Boxing Day as a big event isn't nearly as big as it used to be compared to some of these big e-commerce events there as well. So yeah, we're seeing that it's a more educated and savvy consumer. They know a little bit more around how to get a good deal, how to make it work for them. I think last year as well, we did have a lot of shopping pressure in terms of AusPost and different posting providers starting to say we're actually looking at delays at the end of the year. If you're going to buy something, shop early. So a lot of these things have helped give the picture to people that if you really want to be having a great experience, getting what you want online, have your own plan as a consumer and really come to the table prepared once it starts to get down to the end of the year.
100%. And we'll have some kind of key takeaways, I think, for brands as well in terms of adapting to that consumer mindset. One of the points is around making sure you've got a presence and you've got kind of visibility, well in advance of the peak season, so that people are seeing your brand, kind of thinking about the purchase decision and kind of warming them up as we get into that true kind of shopping period. What we're looking at here is another insight around kind of the time of year that people start their Christmas shopping or their peak season shopping, I should say. The vast majority are not last minute shoppers these days. So you're seeing a crazy group of people starting their peak season shopping in January. 3% of people apparently start their shopping in January. And that grows as the year goes on to the point where over a quarter of people have already started Christmas shopping in August. And bear in mind, that's 2 months ago. That's a decent chunk of people that are already thinking about their Christmas purchases or their peak season purchases and kind of take that through to the end of the year. You've got almost 60% of people who have already kind of begun their shopping in November. So very much not a last minute surge, very much kind of a gradual phasing in of people as they start to think about this earlier and earlier in the year. When you look at kind of the peak season window, this is a bit of an insight around kind of where we're seeing our clients as Overdose invest their advertising money in the kind of days as we go through that peak season. So what you're looking at here is a date range between November and the end of the year, end of December, and marking up kind of those key, what we've referred to as the key peak season sale events. So The first kind of blip there is what we call Click Frenzy, which is an Australian online shopping event, and Singles Day, which happens to fall around the same time. So you've got 3 days there where things kind of start to get a bit of activity. Obviously, the major kind of event still in peak season is this concept of Cyber Weekend. Once was Black Friday, then Cyber Monday, then Cyber Weekend, now effectively Cyber Week, as we start to see kind of all of that sale activity come slightly earlier in that week and kind of building up from that Monday beforehand. So the kind of chunk in the middle there is really where there is a hive of activity around sale events, and that's kind of where we're seeing a lot of investment focused, or at least were last year. We'd expect that to probably kind of go up again this year in terms of, you know, the spread of investment across that weekend even earlier, as brands start to try and get ahead of those Black Friday and Cyber Monday events. And then you have, you know, what was once the key kind of retail date in the calendar being Boxing Day is now not as big as Cyber Weekend or Cyber Week. It's kind of very much the last minute kind of final sale event of the year. So it's still important. There's still a lot of spend that's focused on Boxing Day, but it's just not at the same scale as Cyber Weekend. Vinny, any
I think
thoughts to share on that?
On that one, there's, you know, it's obviously, you know, leading into the holiday season, a lot of people are doing Christmas shopping, but one of the other things that, you know, that people do around this time is they shop for themselves. You know, it's a really good time if you do have things in mind coming up to summer, or, you know, just in generally just looking for something for yourself. There's, you know, very large portion of consumers just looking for general deals and bargains, and things like that. That's where Boxing Day used to probably have a little bit more of an impact for that personal shopping. There's definitely still categories that align, you know, to that end of holiday season shopping, but yeah, we are seeing that that Cyber Week being the big thing. There's also the kind of infiltration of large retailers that we've really never seen before starting to take place. And, you know, by that I mean, last year I remember turning on the television during Cyber Week, and you'd see major retailers taking up nearly every ad spot with their Cyber Weekend sales and things like that, which was something, you know, quite unique. So you're getting a bit more of that omni-channel experience. Like, there are people who can get the same deals in store that they're getting online. There's lots of evidence suggesting that people are still doing their kind of preemptive shopping lists generation online, getting an idea of what they want. And then, you know, if they do want to go in store to try something on, they know what they're after. They're not there to, you know, kind of browse. They want to just go in there, get the deal and get out. So yeah, pretty fast evolving space at the moment. There's definitely a bit of competition out there, I think, is a concern. And that's where that strategy comes into play, of making sure that you're getting in there early enough to be effective, and you're not necessarily going to get drowned out when everyone else is trying to make a lot of noise during that kind of peak time.
Yeah, definitely. Just to show this a different way, this is a month by month spend of, you know, where our clients are investing their advertising dollars. And again, you see a huge jump from October to November, where really that sale activity kicks off. So you see a massive leap at that time, and then a relatively high December, but slightly lower than November. That's kind of where the spend falls across the year. Things obviously ramp up from January right through to the end of the year, with November being the biggest month. The interesting thing is when you kind of overlay that with the way that advertising costs look, you see that you're not going to necessarily get as much bang for your buck in November. Obviously, when spend increases, there is increased competition, and advertising costs go up as a result. So what we've overlaid here on this chart is the costs that we're seeing for across the Meta/Facebook platform in blue, and the costs for the Google platform in yellow. Particularly Facebook, you know, we saw last year that there was just a huge increase in costs over that November period, where retailers were piling into advertising space. There was much more competition, much more demand for advertising space. So you really see, you know, the increase in investment is offset by the increase in costs. So you're getting kind of less return during that month. Point being, the earlier you can go with, you know, your promotions and sales, and the earlier you can capture some of that early demand, the less you're going to have to pay for those conversions. You know, we always encourage clients to kind of go in early and try and make the most of that early demand, rather than kind of competing with everybody else, you know, in that month of November when things are just, you know, at a heightened state of demand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, even though we're coming to you from the paid marketing space, I think it just actually echoes how important it is to have a really successful foundation of non-paid channels. If you do have your organic search or email, direct referral, all those channels are actually, doing a great job providing that consistency. It just means that you're not as, reliant on some of those peaked advertising costs during those months, and you can be a bit more strategic when it comes to working out your trading strategy. It does get, particularly around that Black Friday, Cyber Monday period, it does get quite competitive there. So really thinking about what makes sense for your business, not just throwing money at something and seeing that profit diminish. I think that's a really it did used to work being able to dial up that aggressively, but we are seeing people eat into profits at that time of the year a bit more. So it's just good to kind of be aware of having a game plan there that is going to do the best overall, and not just looking at it for that 4-day period there.
Absolutely. And we flow into some of the conversation around successful email strategies and marketing strategies. I think the stronger you have a proposition around communicating to your known customers and knowing who they are and being able to kind of get the jump on the market in terms of preempting the sales, warming up to the sales, you're not having to spend that money on kind of advertising to new customers to try and compete with everyone else that's trying to get new customers. So again, we'll kind of park the conversation retention and email for a later part of this conversation. But as Vinny says, it's super important with the rising cost of advertising these days, just to be aware that it's important to have other channels to communicate and make sure you're kind of capturing that demand. So there we go. That's the first part of the conversation today. The takeaways, as we see them, are threefold. One is kind of making sure that you've got that brand kind of visibility in market, making sure you've got a presence with consumers in the lead up to the sale event so that they know who you are, what's coming up from your perspective, what the sales will look like, kind of encouraging that early exploration and research, and making sure you're kind of getting that momentum early on with your brand. The other is cost efficiency. Again, going back to those most recent charts, be aware that leaving it until November is the most expensive time to try and find new customers or convert customers from an advertising point of view. So make sure that you're kind of working around that, and as much as possible kind of avoiding that cost inflation at those specific times of the year when everyone else is trying to do the same thing. And then finally, satisfying the savvy customers. So making sure that we know that customers are out there earlier in the year, as we've said, looking for sales and bargains and discounts, making sure you're communicating all of those kind of events and offers as early as possible so that, you're kind of, again, capturing that demand for people who are already in the market from August and September, as we've seen a lot of people are, making sure that you're kind of out there with the appropriate messaging to capture people who are in that frame of mind, before we get to the actual sale event dates. Wonderful. So that was Start Now. So key takeaway, get cracking. Obviously, we have a lot of clients kind of already in that space at the moment. And if you're not in that space, do start thinking about it. I have neglected to mention as well, we are live and we would love to have any questions from the audience too. So if you're listening in, if you've got anything you're curious about, if you've got any experiences to share, please drop them in the chat box and they will, by magic, pop up for us to cover off as we go through. We'd love to hear from you. So yeah, get involved and give us a break from all the talking if you want to. The second point we're going to chat around today is the concept of staying fluid throughout this period. So staying fluid is a reflection on the fact that people are going to be more savvy. They're going to be looking for deals. They're going to be spending money at a slightly different time than they were last year. Advertising costs are going to be volatile. They're going to go up in peak season. They'll be kind of more efficient in other times of year. So stay fluid really for us means just kind of keeping that level of agility and monitoring performance to make sure that you're putting your investment and your attention into the right channels, into the right times, and making sure you're kind of really sharpening the marketing efforts, I guess, as we go through this to make sure that we're capturing as much demand as we can. There are some stats on this slide which talk about kind of the fact that the current consumer, generally speaking, is looking for kind of more value for money. They're perhaps delaying large purchases because they, are feeling the pressure of various economic factors at the moment. They're waiting for sales. So 2 and 3 people are holding out until the sale comes up to buy and make purchases. And when they do see sales, they're often buying multiple items. So we're seeing kind of another shift in the direction of a more savvy customer looking for those bargains, willing to wait for kind of purchases when they get the right events. I think this is just a reflection, Vinny, of kind of where we are at the moment in terms of all of those things being inflation, interest rates, uncertainty, I suppose, in the general kind of ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. And it's off a trend of last year. I think we started to see your brands like Patagonia, who are starting to move a little bit away from this type of alignment, and in terms of they're going, let's actually do something that's good for us as a brand. Let's not go on sale. Let's try and head in a different direction. So I think we actually started to see, and this is actually in response to a question that popped up just on the feed about conscious consumerism and some of the trends that that are in market, but probably were a little bit more present in market. We did see things start to move in a direction, but I think due to the economic conditions of this year, I think everyone's probably just had to maybe take a little rethink of what do we need to do in the interim to get through what is a bit more of a tricky trading time. So yeah, there's probably a bit of a combination of thoughts at the moment. I think ultimately people want to maybe move towards something that makes more sense for their brand personally. I think we'd always recommend for people who've got that, that brand identity sorted, that they don't necessarily go the opposite way and degrade that. But yeah, the consumer's speaking at the moment, and that's I think where a lot of people are listening and saying, if the consumer wants this, that's how they want to be. It's a bit hard to kind of be trying to direct them down a path that they're maybe not as comfortable going down at the moment. Yeah, what we're definitely seeing is that, and what I think the next month is going to look like, particularly, is that holding out before the sale period. If we do have a savvy consumer, are there going to be as many people, shopping early, or they're going to be kind of piling in on some of those big sales events?
Absolutely, and I hate to kind of bang on about it, but I think again back to the marketing automation piece and that kind of direct communication that you can now have with consumers through email. I feel like that's a much kind of bigger opportunity or better opportunity to kind of really bring those values through. So it's really hard to, I think, convince someone who's kind of seeing an ad that you've got great sustainability values, you've got great credentials, and kind of really get across what the brand's about. But if you've got that more consistent kind of more direct communication with the customer through something like email, there's just a more of an ongoing dialogue, I guess, in terms of kind of warming them up to what the brand's about. And as Rob says, kind of get across some of those more kind of ethical elements perhaps to the brand and kind of some of those messages that will help you avoid kind of people, ultimately kind of falling back to those sale events and kind of trying to change that behavior. Cool.
Thanks for the question, Rob. Great question.
Awesome. So staying fluid. So on the subject of staying fluid, we've touched on already kind of in this conversation the idea that ad costs are increasing. What we're sharing here is a bit of an insight into kind of how much those costs are increasing year on year. So this is a combination of data that we have from our advertisers and our merchants that we're seeing in the platforms in terms of the costs on Google and Meta platforms. So Google being yellow, Meta being blue. And then some industry information that we're seeing for the likes of Amazon and TikTok, where we've got kind of access to kind of bigger pools of data. But universally, the trend is that ad costs are increasing year on year across all metrics. So you're seeing CPCs increase, you're seeing CPMs increase, and as a result, you're seeing the cost per purchase, the CPP, increase across all these platforms. Some are more pronounced than others. Definitely Meta, we've seen in the last sort of 18 to 24 months, quite a significant increase in costs due to changes in data, privacy regulations, measurement kind of challenges, attribution challenges. I think Meta have kind of felt that the most with their advertising costs and attribution. But the likes of Amazon aren't immune. Amazon is steadily growing revenue and advertiser demand year on year, so costs are increasing on Amazon as well. TikTok really here is the kind of the big outlier, because TikTok is across all of these platforms, the newest, I guess, entrant, one that's getting massive attention, one that's getting more and more kind of brand demand, brands trying to figure out how to use it. And as a result, you're seeing kind of costs increase quite significantly year on year. I'd say not to the point where they're necessarily more expensive than the other channels, but certainly kind of from where they started, we've seen some quite big increases as more and more brands, pile into that space. There's more demand, there's more competition, costs naturally increase. Vinny, you're probably seeing this, more than most in terms of across our portfolio of clients, just where these kind of increases are coming in, and it is kind of significant, and it does impact, profitability for brands and businesses, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the the things that's always a bit of a concern when we do see the increase in costs, and advertising's not immune from inflation by any means. It's probably an index, if anything. But if a brand is looking at how much do I spend this year? Last year I spent X. Can I spend 20% more than I did? You're basically in the same spot that you were last year in terms of the effectiveness of how much traffic can be generated from that investment. So realistically, people need to take that into account above what they spent last year, looking at the rise of costs of advertising. But then critically, advertising needs to be more effective, needs to be smarter, more strategized. So I think that's where that a good company can combat some of those costs, is to actually just be more effective, more efficient, utilize new or smarter ad technology to make sure that the costs are being driven into more effective advertising. I think that's a really key one to kind of take away from there. And going back to what we were saying earlier as well, just really making sure that we're part of a bigger ecosystem. I think a lot of businesses have seen rapid growth over the last couple of years by leveraging into paid channels, because they're it's immediate. Like, you get immediate uplifts of traffic and sales, and it can really help growth. But if the balance is now a little bit out of whack in terms of that organic owned traffic versus that paid traffic, then it can start to bite when we're looking to dial up further and further and further. I think just making sure that there's a bit of a holistic strategy in place can always be the best way to succeed in these kind of months.
Yeah, for sure. I can see a question in the comments box, and I don't know if it would pop up on screen, from Jordan, which is talking about kind of what is the right type of messaging. Oh, look, as if by magic, the right of messaging for brands to kind of be pushing out there during peak season. It's a really good question. I think obviously every brand is going to be different with kind of what their messages need to be, depending on the nature of the product and how much consumers will be waiting for discounting and sale activity. But I think one thing I'd say about that is that we're seeing, a lot more focus on kind of the importance of brand, and we're kind of getting a lot more clients moving into things like programmatic advertising, which is about, looking more at display and video, and the way that those formats can really kind of do that job of maintaining brand awareness, kind of warming up consumers to the brand. They've got richer formats. They've got the ability to tell a story of the brand. I don't think that starts in peak season. I think it's an always on layer where we need to have that kind of awareness, but really tie that to sale events. So one thing that we do for every client is kind of understand what's the always on layer. What do you need to be doing kind of at a baseline to just manage and maintain that level of awareness out there and that share of voice, and really kind of be communicating to new customers and prospects kind of what your brand's about, and the values of the brand. And then underneath that, you kind of bring in that layer of sale activity, or the peak activity, where you're kind of dialing up, sale events to really drive conversions. But Vinny, I think it's fair to say every client will be a different kind of mix of those two things. But we are seeing, generally speaking, more awareness of the need to have that layer of kind of visibility in market, I think, without necessarily pushing sale messaging.
Yeah, and a lot of brands are also, if they are wanting to give exclusivity and actually, try and give back to people who have gone out of their way to sign up and become a part of a database, they might even be, doing things like, we are going to go on sale, next week. If you want access to that sale, you do need to sign up. So there's a bit of kind of gatekeeping and things like that people will use to try and make sure that, know that we will give you a deal, but it's not for everyone. So try and sign up and be part of our exclusive club there. So there's a few interesting ways that people go about it. I think fundamentally, brands need to think about how they do make people who are part of their database. If you're a VIP, if you've been there a long time, if you're a frequent shopper, make people feel included and get them access to the sale earlier, or give them a special, unique thing so that at the start of the sale, they feel very much like I've got loyalty here. I'm actually really enjoying being part of the brand, knowing about me, reaching out to me. And then, 3 or 4 days later, then giving the wider public access to the sales. So definitely a few different ways of just leading up to that period there. We've also got a question that's come through about TikTok and, having an effect on peak season. So, I think there's a couple, really interesting parts here around consumer, online habits, social media landscape. It's changed. There's a lot more niche communities now. It's not just one platform with everyone on it. There's people in multiple platforms in multiple pockets of each of those platforms. So it's a really, diverse and complex space now. I think authenticity from brands as well, as May's pointed out here, has been, such a, amazing thing to see over the last year, where everyone was going for a really polished aesthetic in the past and making sure everything's looking, as primo as possible. And then now going to a point where they're going, you know what, we actually just want to be real. We want to speak to people. We want to actually, have an engagement with our customer that feels genuine. So creative and, bringing in a much more greater array of UGC content. We've seen that, be very effective as well. Just trying to diversify and reach people in the community the way that they would like to be kind of spoken to and advertised to. I think with TikTok, fundamentally, we are seeing a movement of the younger generation away from Meta. I think that's pretty apparent. So if there is a part of a demographic that you're kind of feeling like you're not getting in terms of your current strategy, I think that's where TikTok has the greatest value in trying to just introduce you to new users. But also just be aware that there needs to be creative considerations in how you advertise there. It's not so easy just to port over content from other platforms and reach people in an authentic manner. So there can be a bit of work trying to build out that strategy, but it's definitely worthwhile considering as a new additional factor into the mix. I guess going back to an earlier slide, like doing the same thing that we did last year and the year before and the year before that, it's not going to win this year. It's all about being aware of what's going on, but also making sure that you always got something new up your sleeve. You've got something new to trial and to test, and that's where we see the best success year on year, is the brands that have a good game plan, but they also have a bit of an X factor that they want to bring into the mix.
Yeah, definitely. I think the creative thing is just another kind of interpretation of staying fluid. I think it's, as you say, Vinny, it's just so important now that you're using the right content and the right tone with the right channel, and that means that inevitably brands and merchants will need to be producing more content that's appropriate to the place that people are seeing it. I think it's probably still fine to have a great glossy brand ad that's running on YouTube, because that's your kind of hero format, and you might want to kind of win some new kind of customers there. But on the other hand, TikTok it's got to be authentic, and that means that you're going to have a lot of content that's kind of designed and appropriate for the right audience and the right channel. So again, much more kind of fluidity there. That's something we're kind of working with brands on in terms of that content matrix, and how much content do you need for each kind of stage of the funnel, and across every platform it becomes quite a lot to think about. But obviously you can drive performance by kind of making sure the message is right for the right environment. One other element that is kind of under this umbrella of fluidity, we're seeing a lot of movement from the big platforms, predominantly Google and Facebook, looking to build out kind of the automation of their ad products. So less about kind of agencies like ourselves kind of pulling individual levers and kind of making changes to optimize, and more about kind of trust the platform and the machine to do the optimization and put the ads in the right place for the right user with the right message. I think we would agree that we aren't quite there yet in terms of the trust in these platforms and technologies. Certainly it's our job to interrogate them, make sure that performance is stacking up, making sure that we're seeing gains from kind of the way that we worked in the past. It's not going to be something that goes away. I'm constantly saying, automation is here to stay. We need to embrace it. There's just this balance, I think, at this point, Vinny, of kind of making sure that we're keeping these new platforms and products honest, I guess, to a degree for our customers and making sure that we're getting good performance, whether it's a balance of kind of old school optimization versus new school performance max testing, which is the example we've got here. Performance max being Google's new product, which effectively runs across all Google environments and all kind of formats through machine learning and automation to optimize. But we're kind of, I think, in that process at the moment of kind of adapting, testing, learning before we kind of migrate fully.
Yeah, and we are seeing some really good results here. With PMax especially, I think over the last year we're more and more confident in the platform and in what it can do. I would say just don't put your eggs in one basket in peak season. You don't want to, look at your ads and see that something is not working because you've got this mass competitiveness, all this money coming into the platform. I don't know if it's been stress tested enough. So I would say if you're, planning your peak season strategy, have a few different fallbacks. Have old school search campaigns running on Facebook. We're big advocates for having a good array of different conversion objective or different campaign types in play there, because day to day there's going to be changes. There's going to be things that might be working better, working worse, and we just have to have more levers to pull and not to be able to, we don't want anyone to be scratching their head at the middle of the day going, there's not that many things we can do right now with a automated campaign. If it's not working the way we wanted it to, you're going to be a bit stuck. So definitely have a few irons in the fire. Make sure that there's a bit of new school, there's a bit of old school. And, as we get through this kind of competitive season, then this is the learning for next year. We'll work out what, are we happy with the level of automation? Do we need to be changing things up and doing things differently? But yeah, definitely some really good new things here. I'm just always a bit old school when it comes to making sure that, we've got lots of options on the table and can really drive the best results by being fluid here.
Mm-hmm. Great. So let's wrap up the section in terms of what we're saying, stay fluid. Making sure your budgets have some fluidity in them. We want to make sure we can capture demand. So we've got the right kind of KPIs and metrics there. If we do see increased demand or reduced demand, we've got that kind of ability to move within budgets based on kind of the way that consumers are acting. Test the automation to make sure it's, things like Performance Max are a part of what you're doing. But as Vinny says, making sure you've not got everything in one basket so that you've got a range of tactics and techniques and platforms in play so that you can use automation where it's working, but you can also fall back to other methods and techniques where it's not working. So that's the second part. And the third part being creative excellence. So again, kind of making sure, this year compared to last year, you've got the right creative for the right channels where people are looking for your brand or shopping. TikTok being the obvious example, it's a very different shopping experience and creative experience to Google or YouTube. So just keep in mind that you need to kind of have that range of creative that works best for each platform. Great. Quick time check. 40 minutes in. We've got two sections to cover. We'll kind of run through section 3, which is about retention. We've talked a lot about advertising so far. We've talked about the fact that advertising is getting more expensive. It's getting harder to target people, harder to identify, harder to re-communicate through advertising, as we all know. All of that means that retention and a first-party data strategy is pretty much critical now for any brand that's out there to have a well-performing, kind of well-oiled retention strategy to make sure that when you do onboard a customer, when you've got a purchase or a visit to your site, you're really kind of capturing some data around who that customer is and the ability to kind of understand them and then go back to them through kind of direct channels to communicate offers and kind of build that relationship and encourage repeat purchase. One kind of insight to kick things off here, I'm sure all of us as kind of digital consumers or consumers in general would agree with this, that there is just so much more kind of choice and diversity in the kind of in the locations that you come across brands these days. At least half of people are using more than 3 channels when it comes to kind of engaging with a brand or a product. So you're kind of seeing consumers come across brands in lots of different environments, different channels. They're searching for things in different places. They've got a combination of physical and digital kind of interactions and experiences. So there's just a huge range of kind of touch points for every brand where a consumer might be coming across them. That is obviously really complex to manage. It's difficult to manage a consistent messaging and communication to an individual consumer if they're coming across your brand in all of these places. So I think that's something to kind of set the scene here and to be aware of. As advertising gets more expensive, you're also finding a lot more fragmentation in the places that people are coming across brands. So it's more and more challenging to communicate to them in every single place consistently. We're talking a lot about, therefore, the first party data strategy is super important for brands. It's about, when customers land on your site or make a purchase, it's about doing everything you can to know as much as possible about those customers and capturing the data at the point that they're visiting you and kind of engaging with you. So know as many visitors as you can, for example, collect as much data as you can on them at that point, and then kind of use that first party data to really double down on your targeting through marketing platforms. So the ability to take data from your EDM platform and push it out to advertising platforms to really customize and tailor the communications to those customers makes a massive difference in the way that you can drive performance, rather than kind of constantly going out to engage with someone for the first time through advertising. I think that all of this data is the fuel for your marketing efforts. Vinny, you can probably talk about kind of the degree to which brands are kind of embracing this. There probably is, again, a spectrum of brands in terms of some who have got this nailed already, and others who are kind of putting the pieces together to build a sort of successful marketing automation proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and one of the things that an announcement and a new feature that got rolled out this week was the Klaviyo Google Ads integration, so you can properly sync up, first party data into campaigns and utilize that across lots of different areas. Previously people having to manually upload and do these types of things there. So there's definitely a lot of technology that's coming in to help with this. I think everyone knows how important it is. Most brands that we're working with have been doing this for a while and are kind of continuing to evolve and to be a little bit more kind of specific with how they use that data as well. But definitely an exciting space, seeing how all of this comes together and to really make sure that we can get the most out of that data that has been captured, and looking at how we can generate more revenue, and be a bit more efficient as well. Like, let's look at who we can exclude from advertising more effectively based upon their proper first party data habits.
Absolutely. And just to illustrate kind of the point around, the value of that first party database, this is a bit of a visual of one of the dashboards that we, work with clients on, in terms of looking at, the volume of people who are first time purchasers, but then never return effectively. So point here being, you've got a huge chunk of customers who are one-off purchases, and then you've got a massive churn rate from that point to people who just never come back. The ability to kind of capture data on who these people are when they're making their first purchase and first engagement with the brand is just, a massive opportunity to kind of recommunicate, bring them back to the site, give them offers, bring them kind of into the brand, and hopefully kind of encourage that repeat purchase. But the volume of, those people is significant. So that data is available. It exists hopefully in your CRM platforms. But the point is, don't underestimate the number of people that relates to, and the revenue opportunity with those customers who are returning to the site. And a bit of an illustration here of kind of the ways that you can start to kind of carve out, the messaging and the consumer journey. So obviously, kind of when you're looking at an abandoned cart event, perhaps you can kind of start to plot out, how would you communicate with those people on the basis that they're either a new customer that hasn't been to your site before but has abandoned cart, or they've previously been to your site and they've abandoned cart. And so therefore, thinking about the ways that you use channels kind of in that flow to recommunicate, either retarget or send a follow-up email message, you start to build out kind of really smart flows when it comes to, making the most of those particular customer segments. And again, kind of going back to the point around the kind of the Klaviyo and Google Ads integration, the more that you can understand about who the person was that kind of abandoned that cart, whether they've come across you before, whether you know them, or whether they were just first-time visitors, just allows you to kind of push different messaging and communicate different things to those people based on how you're setting up those segments in the EDM / customer data platform, CDP, whatever you may be using. Great. Moving along. So there we go. That's a summary of retention. Probably the shortest section that we've spoken about today, but probably the most important, I think, some would argue, in terms of making sure you're capturing the opportunity there. So a lot about kind of making sure you're building out your customer lists, developing your segmentation strategy to really kind of hone in on what your cohorts are, how to talk to them, how to leverage kind of that data to encourage them to become regular customers and drive long-term value. And the second point here, the second key takeaway is using this peak season to grow. So we talked a little bit earlier about kind of the use of brand formats to potentially encourage signups and registrations for the brand. Everything that we do during peak season, albeit may not necessarily be to drive peak season revenue, will be valuable as we go into next year in terms of building out, that database, that understanding of who your customers are, the ability to communicate to them over the course of the next 12 months. Peak season really is a great opportunity to build out that database and that first party data set for kind of future conversations. So everything we do, over the next 3 months isn't just for the next 3 months. It's definitely about building that kind of longer term value and that customer engagement. Great, last section. We've got about 10-13 minutes to go, so we're not doing too bad. We're going to finish up talking a little bit about kind of what customers are, I guess, kind of looking for in the market, reasons why they may not be shopping on your site and maybe shopping on others. This is a lot to do with, I think, kind of the past 2 years and I guess changing expectations when it comes to online shopping, the reasons why people have moved to online shopping over the last couple of years, forced by the circumstances, and therefore kind of what they're looking for today in terms of either messaging or offers or functionality or, general kind of customer experience, I guess, from merchants. So let's run through some of those insights to start with. This is talking about the reasons why customers are shopping online. So let's start with, why are people still going to online websites rather than going into stores? We've got a couple of obvious kind of stats here around, COVID restrictions, people being concerned about going to stores, and those are, I would say, hopefully kind of less pronounced than they have been in the last couple of years, but that will still play a role, I think, for some parts of the society who are just still relatively reluctant to go in and do in-store shopping. So that will be, playing a little part, I think, of this year, probably not as much as last year. But then you kind of come to the bigger reasons why people are shopping online. Convenience is still the obvious one. It's still much easier to sit on a laptop and do research and buy online where you can. The ability to shop around, that has always been, a massive advantage for online shopping. You've got the ability to kind of quite easily change shopping environments, research, do everything from the kind of comfort of your sofa. And again, kind of shopping a wide range of products. So these all sound obvious, but I think it's interesting just to kind of remind ourselves why people are kind of still going online to do their shopping, and kind of contrast that with the reasons why people may still be reluctant to online shop. And again, some of these things I think have kind of come through over the last couple of years where, as we mentioned earlier, we've had a lot of logistics problems with delivery and courier delays over the last kind of year or two. That's still kind of in people's heads. I think that's still an issue that, makes them more reluctant to buy online if they don't think they're going to get something on time, or if it's going to take much longer than they need it to. Information on stock. So making sure that, we're as accurate as possible and we're kind of not setting false expectations that something will be in stock and kind of, and having that fall over for the customer's experience. General website experience, no one wants a clunky website to navigate around and kind of make it difficult to shop. People want a kind of a smooth, seamless, enjoyable experience, and generally kind of other visibility issues. So I think these are the main barriers why people may still be kind of reluctant to shop online, and we're seeing people go back into stores. But Vinny, I don't know if you've got anything to add there, but I feel like this is kind of, it talks to a little bit around kind of some of the messaging we can start to focus on in advertising, for example, and some of the features and functions of, showcasing local inventory, for example, in ads that we're kind of making a focus for a lot of brands to make sure you've got that reliable data there for them to make decisions on.
Yeah, and I think that kind of connecting between the online and offline probably took a step back over the last couple of years. People didn't have an offline presence who, do have a retail brick and mortar part to their business as well. There wasn't really as much of a reason to try and connect the dots there, but that's always been a bit of a really strong interest, is to understand if someone's browsing online, they want to come in store to buy something, what does that look like? How do we measure it? Local inventory ads is a really excellent way of doing that. Basically connecting up in-store stock level data into Google Shopping ads and really making people aware that if you actually want to buy this now, don't want to get to the store and find out it's out of stock, you can see this is in stock. You can go through, it's 5 kilometers away. Here's the directions. So that kind of thing is really, really exciting. I think over the last couple of years as well, just with people, the necessity of online shopping, people started to shop for everything. It wasn't just, I just want to buy these jeans or this or that. It was, I want to buy, a couch. I want to buy something that's big for my house. And that would have been a bit more of a risk in the past. But I think once people have had that experience and they know, a little bit more about it, they've been able to get through that and work out, this is a great thing. This is convenient. And, I prefer this from now on as well. So definitely some interesting trends going through there. And we are seeing, I think this year that definitely that omni-channel side of things to be where a lot of businesses are focusing is, what can we understand of the offline shopper as well as the online shopper and how those things are brought together. But yeah, I think that's a few of the trends we're seeing in the market for sure.
Sorry, Vinny, I left you hanging there solo while I dropped out.
All good.
I'm sure you didn't even notice. Awesome. Just let me reshare my screen again, and then we'll carry on. Great. So yeah, we are talking about kind of reasons to shop and not to shop. Again, I think kind of just to add to that sort of insight around kind of where there are opportunities for competitive advantage when it comes to, what's on your site or what you're pushing in your advertising. All of these things kind of come off the back of, what customers are expecting or looking for with their shopping experience. So making sure that delivery is visible, there are easy returns for that experience. They're also looking for discounts, as we know from earlier kind of stats and insights. So there's a lot here around just general kind of information and making that shopping experience something that people can trust and kind of rely on and have all the information they need to make that decision and expect to get their delivery, when they need it. So all these things sound obvious, but again, it's just kind of, this is all what the consumer is expecting. And I think it's important to reflect that, when you're pushing out marketing messages or building kind of a site that talks to, all of these things that that customers need. Great. So to wrap up that fourth and final section, making sure that we are talking to customers in a very user-centric way. We started out by saying customers are coming across brands in many different places now. They're doing a lot of research in a lot of different platforms. As much as possible, it's really important to kind of know who that customer is and kind of tailor communications and offers and products to them as an individual or as a cohort, depending on what you know about that person. I think that's easiest when it comes to a first-party data strategy and you're knowing who you're talking to and you're able to segment users and kind of understand a little bit about each person. It's more difficult when it comes to advertising these days. It's much more difficult to know, who that person is, what they're interested in, what age they are. That all becomes much more difficult to understand in an advertising environment. So leaning more on email and marketing automation is really key there. Omnichannel approach, talking to some of the factors around kind of reasons for people shopping or not shopping online. I think, again, it's important just to make sure we're trying to connect those two experiences as much as possible. We had the example of the local inventory ads, making sure that people can see what's available in store and they can kind of trust that they can go in store and find that product. All of those things, kind of making sure that there's that seamless approach to communicating information and offers to customers, both online and offline. And then the last point here, the size of storefront. So yeah, again, kind of doubling down on all the information that a customer is looking for, all the reasons why they can trust your shopping experience, make sure that those are prominent on sites, and just make sure that you're kind of talking to customers with what they want to see and understand. Fabulous. This is our final slide. I want to put a call out. If anyone's got any kind of final burning questions that you want to fire at us before we say goodbye and leave you to your days, please do drop them in the comment section. But just to wrap up, so we've talked about 4 themes today, all about peak season. And I just want to make a point here. I get criticized for my dad jokes, but I think wrap up is an outstanding pun to finish on, and I'm proud of that. I don't care what you think. Okay, so the 4 themes, start now. So make sure that if you haven't already started, work through a process of kind of defining what you want to achieve this peak season, setting objectives, setting strategies and platforms, building out your content in your creative matrix. But do that, now if you haven't started already. Customers are already shopping out there. They're already looking for bargains. So it's really important that we kind of get the wheels turning and make sure we're setting ourselves up for success over the course of the next few months. Number 2 is stay fluid. That applies to making sure you're using the right channel mix, the right product mix. You're using a combination of automation and kind of more manual, old school techniques that we know work. So test all of these things, but stay agile with the way that you're, using budget, and kind of keep a degree of fluidity and agility in kind of where you're spending money, so that you're able to shift it to places that are working the best. And you've got options to move budget around as we go through peak season. Make retention a focus. So again, kind of doubling down on your first party data strategy, making sure you've got that nailed and you understand kind of everything you can do to capture first party data, and either use it over the course of peak season or use it as a springboard into next year, where you're really kind of capturing a lot of lead generation, a lot more customers, and generally kind of building up your first party data set that can be later used to hone in targeting, to adapt advertising messages, to segment users, and make sure you're kind of capturing as much revenue from those returning customers. And point 4, mitigate barriers. So just keep in mind kind of all of the things that a customer is using as excuses not to shop online, and kind of make sure that you're answering those questions or doing everything you can to overcome those obstacles for them making that purchase online. That will be a combination of what you're pushing in advertising messages, but also what you're showing on your storefront, and kind of the information that you're sharing with customers. So there we go. I've spoken enough. Thank you, Vinny, for all of your incredible insights, as always. Our legend in the marketing world. I've enjoyed it. I can't see any more questions that have popped up, so we'll shut the comments down at this point. Do get in touch via LinkedIn or through direct channels if you know us. We'd love to kind of talk more about any of these things. This presentation is a part of a bigger deck we've put together for peak season. So there is a lot more detail behind this in terms of strategies and kind of planning frameworks to use as we go through peak season. So we would happily share that with anyone who's interested. So hit us up. And as we approach the hour, I'll say thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next chill. Thanks again, Vinny.
Thanks very much.